complexity of this problem and the vastness of it. And then we will realize that we are going to have to forget some of these so-called organizational principles and organizational aims and objectives, and realize that the real principle, the real aim, and the real objective is a solution to the problem.
A police state. Just make the Negro neighborhood a police state. It's the most heavily patrolled. It has more police in it than any other neighborhood. Yet it has more crime in it than any other neighborhood. How can you have more cops and more crime? Why? It shows you that the cops must be in cahoots with the criminals. You make my point. That as long as a white man does it, it's all right. A black man is supposed to have no feelings. We want freedom by any means necessary. We want justice by any means necessary. We want equality by any means necessary. We want it now, or we don't take anybody to death.
So whatever kind of action program can be devised to get us the things that are ours by right, then I'm for that kind of action no matter what the action is. I don't think when a man is being criminally treated that some criminal has the right to tell that man what tactics to use to get the criminal off his back. When a criminal starts misusing me, I am going to use whatever necessary to get that criminal off my back. And the injustice that has been inflicted upon Negroes in this country by Uncle Sam is criminal. Don't blame a cracker in Georgia for your injustices. The government is responsible for the injustices. The government can bring these injustices to halt. And what you and I have to let the man know is we are peaceful people. We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us. But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us.
Hey, Uhuru, y'all heard that? Heard that from the horse's mouth. I agree with that. We don't love anyone who doesn't love us. Hey, peace to the family. Thanks for tapping into another episode of We Charge Colonialism. Here live and direct. Let me know how the mic sounding too, because sometimes the mic goes in and out, and just want to make sure we got some clarity as I go through this teaching, this study tonight. Again, honoring the legacy of Malcolm X. This is the centennial, the 100 years since the birth of Malcolm X, and we're going to do it right all year, man. All year. I'm excited. This is going to happen consistently. Sundays, Tuesdays, check in with me, because I'm going to be here and I'm going to be going live, and I'm going to be discussing something around Malcolm X. If you missed the last one, the last teaching happened on Tuesday, and I was discussing Manny Marable's book, Life of Reinvention, and Les Payne's book, A Dead or a Rising, and looking at chapters 1 of both of those books. So I will circle back around to those books as well. I'm probably going to, by the end of the year, have covered both of those books in its entirety. But I was just looking at those opening chapters, sort of doing the compare and contrast sort of thing. But tonight, I'm going to be looking at Malcolm X's prison years. That's what the topic is tonight. That it was during that time in prison that Malcolm makes this transformation, and it was a very significant point in Malcolm's life. And so I want to look at that because there's a lot of sources out there that we can look to, and depending on the source you're going to get, depending on the source you use, there's going to be certain things that are going to be left out. Like, everybody doesn't cover all of Malcolm's. There's not like a real focus on Malcolm's prison years, except for this one guy, man, Jeb Bush. I mean, I called him Bush Tucker. Why did I call him that? But anyway, Jed Tucker, he wrote article, Malcolm X, The Prison Years, The Relentless Pursuit of Formal Education, right, by Jed Tucker. and he definitely covered a lot of well, I'm gonna say the angle that he took, he's really focusing on Malcolm X's education in prison. And it's for a particular reason that I'm going to get into in a minute. But the things that he focused on, you don't really get that too much in any of the texts, like Manny Marable's book and Les Payne's book, and even in the autobiography. There's a lot that's left out in regards to what Malcolm was studying while he was in prison, and how important those studies was to him. I mean, you could there's sort of this implication that he was studying, he was reading a dictionary, and he was reading a lot when he was in prison. But there's classes that he's taking, there's things that he's doing that the most texts don't really go into detail about. So, I'm excited to get into that, and a hooroo to all the comrades for jumping on. Before I really get deep into this, though, I'm going to ask everybody to like, to share, to subscribe to the channel if this is your first time here. And I appreciate you all for tapping in, man. I was supposed to go at the God hour. I'm going at the Born hour right now because of some things that came up. But usually it's going to happen at the God hour. You see, that nation right now. I'm in that mood right now. So that's seven for God, 9 for Born. For those who don't know, if you do know, cool. So getting into that, just a quick promo. I am part of the Claim Malcolm X Day committee here in Philadelphia, and there's a couple of events that's coming up. We Charge Colonialism is leading up the organizing with one of these events in February the 23rd. I want to encourage everyone to come out to the Legacy of Malcolm X. It's going to be a seminar February the 23rd at the Rotunda if you're in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia area. February the 23rd is also the born day of W.B. Du Bois and Dr. Amos N. Wilson. And I'm bringing that up because if I wasn't doing this event, I would be doing the teaching. I did a teaching on Dr. Amos N. Wilson and W.B. Du Bois last year on their birthday. But the only reason I'm not doing it this year, of course, is because it's Malcolm Centennial. But I'm going to make that an annual thing to celebrate those two prolific writers and thinkers. So big up to them. But this year, February 23rd, I'm going to be hosting this event here in Philadelphia, on the west side of Philadelphia. Second, as I mentioned, I'm on the Claim Malcolm X Day committee, and it's going to be the 10th annual Malcolm X Day festival coming up, May 17th. So again, this is the centennial. This is probably going to be the biggest festival in the 10 years that this has been put on, right? So this is number 10, but number 100 for Malcolm. So it's going to be really big. I encourage you all to put it on your calendar if you are in the area. Come out to that May 17th, man. May 17th here in West Philadelphia at Malcolm X Park, the Malcolm X Day Festival. And if you want to, I'm going to put across the bottom, if you want to follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, you can do that, man. Twitter, I don't want to curse that too much, but CMXD Philly. Just look up CMXD Philly on Instagram, Facebook, and follow us on social media so you can keep up to date with any programs or things that we are doing leading up to May 17th. Stay tapped in, everybody. And last but not least, if you want to support the Claim Malcolm X Day Festival, you can Cash App us. But if you do that, if you Cash App, make sure you put WCC in the note when you send that, so they know that it's coming from here, that you guys was tapped into We Charge Colonialism, and we put the word out, right? So make sure you do that. I'll put this up here. And send whatever, you know. I mean, $5, $10, $1,000, you know, whatever you can afford. You know what I'm saying? But make sure you put WCC so they know that we represent, man. We putting the word out. So yeah, that's CMXD PH65. Right on, right on. And all of those proceeds will go to the Malcolm X Day Festival for sure. For sure. So yeah, man, let's get into this, right? The prison years. What's happening? Let me get this out my way right now. Out my way. All right, man. Let's get into this. And anybody who want to come up here and share, I'm going to put this StreamYard link in the chat because I always like to build with the people. And I know that there's people out there who have been impacted by Malcolm X the same way that I have. That's why you hear it, man. I mean, to be honest, like, you know, with Malcolm X, man, it was a time that I really like felt like everything that I was going through, like my whole trajectory was like the same as Malcolm X. You know, I felt like I was going through having the same lows and going through the same transformation as him, because I experienced some of the same things he experienced, you know, going from that bottom and being behind those walls, not as long as he was though, but you know, being in that space, and just like, how did I get here, you know, and wanting to change myself and go in a new direction. I was just like, they got me. I fell victim to the traps that was set. And Malcolm, when you doing this research, you know, Malcolm, who was locked up with his friend Shorty, Malcolm Jarvis, and they were having a conversation among themselves, and they said that they, in order to get back at society, that they were going to educate themselves so that they could be smarter and fall for these traps that was set for them in this society. They understood like the contradiction. They understood colonialism. They understood what it meant to be black in this system dominated by white people. And so in order for them to get back, they had to educate themselves and learn more about how the system works and how it operates. And the only reason that they ended up where they were at is because of a lack of education. You know, Malcolm said himself, if he finished school, he probably wouldn't have ended up in jail the way that he did. That's what he felt, you know, at the time. And so when he was in prison, he made it his obligation to educate himself. And one of the I think one of like the misnomers or myths out there is that, you know, Malcolm was sort of this ignorant, diabolic, you know, person who was just illiterate and didn't know what he was going to do with his life. And then the Nation of Islam came and just saved his life. The Nation of Islam is going to have a tremendous impact on Malcolm, but Malcolm was already on that trajectory, right? He was already, hey, peace to Harka. I appreciate you, Omar Wiley, for becoming a member, man. I don't even ask, but hey, if you want to be a member, that was just motivation right there. Hey, if you want to be a member, you can, you know, become a member and support the channel. I definitely appreciate that. So before we like really get into this, I'm kind of just, you know, freestyling right now, but I got some notes here I want to go through. I want to show a clip from Malcolm X film. It's my first real introduction to Malcolm X. And I just want to show a scene from when Malcolm was in prison. And then maybe we can have a conversation about like the differences between the film and the real story, right? Some of those characters in the film. So let me show this clip, and then we can come back and get more into Malcolm's story.
Read, study, because the first thing a black man must have is respect for himself, respect his body and his mind. Quit taking the white man's poisons into his body, his cigarettes, his dope, his liquor, This white woman is pork.
Pork? Yeah, my mama used to say that. Don't eat no pork.
Your mama was right. That pig is a filthy beast. Part rat, part cat, and the rest is dog.
All right, pull my coat on this now. What happens if you give all that up? I mean, the pork, and you get sick, and then you get a medical or something? Like when I was on the outside, I ran this hustle. I tried to act like...
I'm telling you God's words, not no hustle. And I'm gonna tell you, God is black.
God is black. Everybody knows God is white.
Everything the white man taught you, you accepted. He taught you were a black heathen, and you believed him. He taught you to worship a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus with white skin, and you believed him. He taught you that black was a curse, and you believed that. Did you ever look up the word black in a dictionary?
For what?
Did you ever study anything that wasn't part of some con?
What the hell for, man?
Come with me. White man throw us a bone, and we're supposed to forget 400 years of oppression.
Yeah, but a Negro playing in the big leagues, that's something, ain't it?
I told you to go behind the words and dig out the truth. They let us sing and dance and smile. And then they let one so-called Negro into the majors. That doesn't cancel out the greatest crime in history. When that grafted, blue-eyed devil locked us in chains, 100 million of us broke up our families, tortured us, cut us off from our language, our religion, our history. Let me tell you about black history. We are the original man. The first men on earth were black. They ruled, and there wasn't a white face anywhere. But they teach us that we lived in caves and swung from trees. That's a lie. Black men never did that. We were a race of kings when the white man crawled around on all fours over the hills of Europe. Do they know who they are? Do you know where you came from? What's your name?
Malcolm Little.
No. That's the name of the slave masters who own your family. You don't even know who you are. You're nothing. Less than nothing. Who are you?
Look, hey, shit. All right, I ain't Malcolm Little, I ain't red, I damn sure ain't Satan.
That's right. So who are you?
I don't know.
We are a nation, the tribe of Shabazz, lost in this wilderness called North America. The merciful Allah has sent us a messenger, a black man named Elijah Muhammad. He reveals to us the true knowledge about ourselves. He teaches us that the true nature of the original man, the black man, is righteousness. So if the nature of the black man is righteousness, Malcolm,
And the true nature of the white man is wickedness.
I knew you'd get it. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the white man is a devil.
I sure met some in my life.
No. Elijah Muhammad does not say that some white men are devils. He teaches us that all white men are devils.
Yay. I was deep in those teachings, boy. I was deep in those teachings. For sure. Again, just talking about my story, man, just having the same having oh man. Don't y'all start. Nah. I don't believe that. I don't believe that these days, man. Maybe they all colonizers though. But yeah, man, I going through that same. I'm reading the autobiography of Malcolm X is going to have a tremendous impact on my life. That scene right there is you. If you read the autobiography of Malcolm X, you can see like there's a tremendous influence. There's a lot of influence on the film. The autobiography, the book, is going to have a lot of influence on and how the story is told. But for some reason, the Bembe character in the book, and I'm sorry, in the film, becomes like this Nation of Islam member that is going to bring Malcolm X into the Nation of Islam. Now that doesn't really happen. It doesn't happen. Now the Bimby character is a real person, and is going to have an influence on Malcolm X, and a motivating sort of influence too. Like Malcolm is motivated and inspired to want to study and read, be smarter, to command, be able to command things and people, be able to sway people with his words, right? That is going to come from the Bimby character, whose name is Bim Bree, but the name Bimby is used in the autobiography book and in the film. So he's not actually a member. The real character is not actually a member of the Nation of Islam that's going to have this influence on him. It's going to be Malcolm's family that is going to bring Malcolm into the Nation of Islam. And so before I get into that, I'm just going to give a bit of timeline for for sure. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna argue with nobody though, brother Nkrumah. I wouldn't argue with nobody. Yeah, so just a bit of some of the sources that I was looking at just to prepare for this was Malcolm X, The Prison Years, as I mentioned earlier, The Relentless Pursuit of Formal Education by Jed Tucker. Of course, the autobiography, looking at that. Les Payne's Malcolm X, The Dead Are Rising. On the Side of My People, A Religious Life of Malcolm X, which is pretty good book. Malcolm X, The FBI Files, looking at that. And Manny Marable's Life of Reinvention, looking at that. The Life of Reinvention, I might have to revisit this topic too and come back with The Life of Reinvention. I think Manny Marable probably does a better job than any of the biographies, and as far as covering the prison years, like what was happening in prison, because he's bringing in a lot of different sources. And Les Payne's book, Les Payne really doesn't spend a lot of time on the topic. He sort of just like touches on the highlights of Malcolm's time in prison, takes some stuff from the autobiography. He does mention, Malcolm taking his education really seriously in prison, but he really doesn't get into like the details. He kind of just like Malcolm's in prison. He gets influenced by his family to join the Nation of Islam. He doesn't even really give a timeline either. But even what, and let me just preface this to say, Les Payne's book is really good though. It's a really good book to check out. But with all of these biographies, all of the written work on Malcolm X, we know that people are going to be selective on what they're going to focus on, right? And the autobiography, for instance, like Malcolm X, when you read the autobiography, in the 2 chapters that it focuses on his time in prison, is Satan and Save. Those chapters, Satan and Save. And Malcolm talks a lot about coming, like his transition from being that street hustler, ignorant person, to becoming a member of the Nation of Islam, being inspired or being influenced by his family to join the Nation of Islam and becoming a dedicated, member of the Nation of Islam, Muslim. And in that chapter, he even gives a history, sort of the history of the Nation of Islam, what they believe. That's what he talks about. He spends a lot of time in those in the chapter Saved to talk about that. So he mentions Hilda is the one who comes and visits Malcolm and really puts the stamp on it, gets Malcolm to join, influences Malcolm to make that decision, because they was like wearing Malcolm down. Were writing him letters. When I say them, I'm talking about his members. Reginald, his family back in Michigan. So Reginald, Filbert. Filbert is the first to write him while he's in prison. And they're being very vague about it too. That's the other thing. They're being vague because they know that the prison, the what do you call the ward, the not the ward, what the hell are they called, uh what's the ward, I don't even know, I lost the word. You got like the CEOs and basically the people controlling the prison. They sure that he's influencing the prison to convert to Islam, so they're checking the letters, and so they got to be vague. Not the CEO, like the ward, is that what they call it? Ward. I thought somebody was gonna put it in the chat for me, but anyway, but yeah, so Filbert Reginald is going to visit him, and he's going to talk to Malcolm about the Nation of Islam, but not necessarily like getting too religious with them, because in their mind, they know Malcolm, he'll be turned off if I know the correctional officers, the person that runs the jail. Wardens, yeah. Thanks, appreciate that. I don't know, I lost it for a second there, but wardens. So Reginald has a conversation with him, but it's not until Hilda comes and lays down the history that Malcolm finally makes that decision. So I'm gonna come back to this, but like as I mentioned before, I'm gonna go into a timeline. So Malcolm, he's going to enter jail in 1946. So the context, you got World War II is just ending, right? 1945, Germany and Japan going to surrender. Harry S. Truman is the president during this time, right? And he's going to be president, I think, the whole time that Malcolm is in prison as well, because Franklin D. Roosevelt is going to pass away while he's in office. So Truman comes to power. So and a few things too, as I mentioned before, Jed Tucker. I like Jed Tucker's article because of the focus on the education piece, like what Malcolm is studying in prison, because it gives us some insight on like how Malcolm becomes like this sharp debater, right? And how he becomes so eloquent and articulate as a speaker. You learn that Jed Tucker brings us into that world. So we know Malcolm X spent 6.5 years in Massachusetts state prisons. There's 3 prisons that Malcolm is going to spend time at while he's locked up. He's going to go to 3 different prisons. He spent time at his first prison is Charlestown. He goes from Charlestown to Concord, and from Concord, the Concord Reformatory, from there to Norfolk Penal Colony. Those are the 3 prisons that Malcolm X is going to spend time at. His goal, Charlestown, at some point be to get to Norfolk because of the type of educational facilities that they have at Norfolk. So he's already on it. Like his first 11 months he spends at Charlestown, and then he's going to be transferred to Concord. But in those first 11 months, within those first 6 months, he's trying to get transferred to Norfolk because of the educational facility. This is before Nation of Islam, right? So he's already on it. He's already looking to transform himself into someone that is not going to, as I mentioned before, fall victim to America society's the traps that the colonizers for African Black people in this country. So just being conscious of that. And if you know his history, Malcolm grew up in a household with Garveyite parents. So he already was conscious of how colonialism and racism works in the United States of America. So he enters prison February 27th. In Jed Tucker's article, he says February the 26th, but if you look, FBI files and all other texts say February the 27th. So that's a discrepancy in his article. with the overall sources that are out there. So February the 27th seems to be the official date that Malcolm enters. The interesting thing, I know Malcolm was assassinated on February the 21st, but he's going to be buried on February the 27th. Malcolm on February the 27th, right? So he enters prison on February the 27th. These dates are significant, to me, they're significant because I was born on February the 27th. So, that's why the number stands out to me so much, man. So he's going to be in prison from February 27th, 1946 to August 7th, 1952. That's when he leaves prison in Black August. August 7th, 1952. If you know what else on August 7th, put in. That's an important date for those who commemorate practice Black August. In prison, while he's in prison, he's going to replace Little with X, of course, because he converts to the Nation of Islam, so he becomes Malcolm X while in prison. He also, I mentioned the jails he went to. After 6 months, he asked to be interviewed by the Norfolk Penal Colony because of his well-known educational facilities. So he's at Charlestown. Another thing about Charlestown at the time is the oldest prison the oldest active open prison in the world at that time. Charlestown opens in 1804, 1805, right? So, and they were talking about, and all the authors talk about how harsh or how terrible the facilities are. So they don't have any like running water system. They're defecating in buckets in their cell. So they have buckets in their cell. They're defecating in their cell. There's no like cafeteria. So they're eating in their cells. So they in the same place, that they're defecating and have buckets. And so they have to wait for someone to come along and empty those buckets. Like that's how it is. Mice everywhere. These are the conditions that these cruel and unusual punishment. You know what I'm saying? This is like the state of the state that all of these prisoners are living in. At the time, 85% of the prisoners too are white. I think that's significant too. So you can see like mass incarceration is going to impact the demographic of prisoners. Oh, it's all about design. The thing about Tucker's article too, I want to mention, Tucker, he uses this language. He says the autobiography is dangerous in its portrayal. He's saying in its portrayal of Malcolm X's prison years, and the reason that he is arguing this is because he's saying, it's being presented as like this pull yourself up by the boot sort of story. Malcolm was this person who was illiterate, had no direction, demonic in a sense. They called him Satan, right? But he was able to transform himself. But he's arguing against that because saying it was the facilities, the institutions that were in those facilities. See, Tucker's his agenda is to that these institutions are playing an important part and can be a transformative, can act as a transformative instrument or tool in people's lives. And so I see like he's trying to make this argument of why these things are needed, in prison. For example, he wants to use like dispel this idea of Malcolm X, doing it on his own, right, and just being motivated. He wants to dispel that and show like, no, there was like the conditions were there for him to be able to do these things. Which there's some truth to that. I'm not like completely arguing against that, but at the same time, Malcolm was, motivated. he sought out those institutions that existed. And I guess if they didn't exist, yeah, would Malcolm would he have become, the person that he had become? Because I mean, keep in mind, I'm just going along with Tucker's argument. Keep in mind, like, yes, maybe he would have become a member of the Nation of Islam, but it was access to these reading materials that Malcolm had access to, where he was able to read about the history of Black people and a history of the world, not even just his own history and his ancestral history. He was able to read philosophy. He was able to, he was able to read books to help him master the English language. He became the person that uh, became the national representative of the Nation of Islam, and was able to go around the world and speak, go around the world, the country first, and then the world, and speak the way that he spoke, is because he did have access to certain books in those institutions. So, I mean, I can unite with it to an extent, but what Tucker does in his article is he tries to downplay um, like had a shape that Malcolm was in. Tucker tries to create another narrative as Malcolm wasn't that bad. He wasn't as bad as we think he was, and there's real record of Malcolm, being the person that he talks about in his autobiography. But the truth is like some of these things aren't on paper. When you look at the other sources, there's like oral histories and there is records that, yeah, Malcolm did this be exaggerated a bit, but Malcolm was a troublemaker. He was someone who was getting in trouble, but probably just not as bad as we may have thought it was. I'm talking about in prison. But and also as far as being illiterate, like Malcolm wasn't illiterate, but at the same time, like Malcolm is probably, when he's telling the story, he's probably looking at where he was at that time to where he is going to, like what he's going to become as far as a speaker. So he may not have been illiterate, but he didn't have a command of the language that he had after after his studies. So Tucker, it's best to just try demystify these stories, but at the same time, I think like the other research, like the parables, the FBI files, there's a lot of research out there that kind of corroborates Malcolm's story. But I think like Malcolm really, there's a lot that Malcolm doesn't he doesn't I think explain. I think, to be honest, man, I'm gonna say like Alex Haley, he's writing this story, and I think like through the conversation that they're having, maybe it was just embellished a bit, right? And at the same time, too, like Malcolm, I think is going back, and he's going back, and he's sort of telling Alex Haley to rewrite certain things in the autobiography, and Alex Haley is changing everything, but I think initially Malcolm is like uplifting the Nation of Islam. But when you read the autobiography, and go back to the autobiography, when you read the 2 chapters of Malcolm when he's talking about him being in prison, there's sort of kind of like there's a moment of praise of the Nation of Islam, and then in the same chapter, he's backtracking on some of the things that he is saying. There's almost like this present tense and past tense when Malcolm is talking in those 2 chapters, where in the same vein he's saying like, I believe this to this day, and then he'll go back. And let me just give you an example so I'm not too vague. So Reginald, his brother Reginald is going to warn Malcolm while he's in prison about the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad. He goes to him, and he's revealing some of the things that Malcolm is going to come find out later on himself. And so Reginald comes to Malcolm, and Malcolm writes Elijah Muhammad while he's in prison about Reginald, because Reginald is now, he's expelled from the Nation of Islam. And so, Malcolm is going to side, and Malcolm's family is going to side with Elijah Muhammad over Reginald. But in the reason Malcolm says Reginald goes on the hill spiral, and he kind of, he loses his mind, he gets institutionalized as a result. And Malcolm is saying, he's sort of like parroting what Elijah Muhammad is telling him, saying like, that was Allah's will. He turned his back on the prophet. And so these are the cards that was dealt to him as a result of going against Elijah Muhammad. And Malcolm is saying that, and he said, I believe this to this day. He says that in the chapter. And then later on, a few pages later, he goes against that and says, no, what really happened is like Reginald, he felt like the pressure of his family not supporting him may have drove him crazy. So he goes against what he said a few chapters earlier, though he said he believes this to this day. So that made me think that, okay, like Malcolm going back and he's retelling this story. But for the most part, when you read it, it does seem like Malcolm is just like really uplifting in those chapters, uplifting like this whole transition that he's making. He's uplifting the Nation of Islam and giving them the credit for the person that he becomes. And this is probably why he does not talk about the education, that the college courses that he's going to be taking. Why he Charlestown? He's taking courses at Charlestown. This is what becomes a member of the Nation of Islam. And I'm emphasizing this because, the Nation of Islam likes to, members like to take, full credit of, Malcolm becoming the person that he is. And this isn't like a diss or a slight against the Nation of Islam, but I just want, us to have the full story. Let's put the truth out there. And the Nation of Islam is going to have a motivating, they're going to be a motivating force on Malcolm X to make him study even harder. I'll give them, that credit. But Malcolm was already on point. So let me go through this this timeline really quick. So January the 12th. Today is January the 12th. Get that? We live and it's January the 12th. So look what happens. January 12th, 1946. Malcolm is arrested on this date right here. I'm telling you, I didn't plan to make this coincide with his arrest. It just happened that way, man. It might be divine, Allah's will, So January 12th, 1946, he's arrested in Boston, a jewelry store, while trying to reclaim stolen watch he had left to her. January 15th, he's indicted for carrying firearms. In January the 16th, 1946, all the same year, he's indicted for larceny and breaking and entering. And February 27th, 1946, he began serving prison terms at Charlestown Prison. So keep in mind that he's going to get 8 to 10 years for the crimes that I just mentioned. Actually, one of these crimes, I think he gets like 3 to 5. But all of these crimes that he was convicted of will run concurrently. So he's serving 8 to 10 years. As I mentioned earlier, he gets out in 6.5 because he was paroled. But he was given 8 to 10 years. Malcolm said himself, he said if he knew he was going to get 8 to 10 years, he would have did armed robbery, right? That's not what happened. He broke in some homes, he stole some stuff. He got 8 to 10 years for that. That's being black in America. That's being black in America. Can you imagine that? Breaking somebody's house, stealing some jewelry, and somebody like, you got 8 to 10 years for that? I had to pause for a second, man. That's being black in America for sure. Hey, it's still happening today. Let me see what you say. Oh, what? That's a classic one. When Malcolm explains that interview, I know we all probably seen that. When Malcolm explains his last name. How did you come to your last name? And then they ask him what his gifted, quote unquote, gifted name is. and he wouldn't say it. He let them white folks say it, but he said he doesn't acknowledge it at all. And yeah, anybody want to too, and just like bring in some context, because it's a lot of information. But if anybody and bring in some context about anything that happened during this period, for sure, that's the link. You can join. You can come on up. So March in 1946, Malcolm begins a reading program in prison library. He begins his reading program. So it's interesting too, because authors, the different authors from the Marabouts, Les Payne, what you're going to get is it seems that Malcolm, he wasn't literate. He was able to write, and some of the letters that they show was I felt was good penmanship, and well written. So in those first few months, even though like he's entering this reading program in March, I feel from the research that Malcolm is still like, he's the hustler Malcolm. He's dibbing and dabbing, he's hustling, and he's still getting high, but he's balancing that with his study. Like he has his ultimate, if you want to call it like hustle or goal, he wants to get out of Charlestown. And is it like he's seeing if he behaves himself, don't get in too much trouble, because in order for you to Norfolk, you don't have to be the model prisoner, because they want to show that they can transform people at Norfolk. So you don't have to be the model prisoner, but you can't be like getting in a whole lot of trouble even. So Malcolm is not probably that character that we see in the film. That just like, they calling him Satan, and he's constantly in the hole. As a matter of fact, the records show that he spent any time in the hole, right? There's no evidence of that. But Malcolm is sort of like getting in trouble. He's getting high, he's dipping and dabbing. His family is about to shun him. Ella was his sister. She's getting tired of him, and so she's not writing as often as she used to. So Malcolm, he doesn't want his family to distance themselves from him. So he begins to change up a bit, and he wants his sister Ella to advocate for him so that he can get to Norfolk. When he gets to Norfolk, that's when he, joins. I see clock ticking. So when he gets to Norfolk too, that's when he joins the debate team as well. I'm gonna get to that in a second, but yeah. So back to the timeline, January 1947, he's transferred to Concord Reformatory. When he gets to Concord Reformatory in 1947, that's where he meets the character Bimby. Bimby, he's tremendously influenced by Bimby. Bimby is like a very person. Bimby is like 20 years his senior. He thinks he's educated. He likes how people respond to Bimby. Bimby commands the crowd. They listen when he speaks. Even the CEOs stop and listen to Bimby when he speaks. And so Malcolm says he wants to be like Bimby, and in order for him to be like Bimby, he knows he has to read, and he studies and have to study harder. And so, Bimby is going to he mentions that in the autobiography as well. I have it on deck, but he mentions that in the autobiography as well. Like he traces his inspiration to read, study, and build his vocabulary to Bimby or Bimbri. So in between 7 and 48, this is when X is going to convert to the Nation of Islam. There's not an exact date, but I think there's no exact date because it is going to be a process. As I mentioned earlier, the family's writing them letters, telling them about this newfound and Reginald, hey, I can get you stop eating and smoking cigarettes. I'm like, boom, I'm stop doing it. Now, this is funny because you see in the film, the clip for, I know everyone wasn't here when I showed the clip, but in the Spike Lee film, Denzel or Malcolm X is walking with Bimby, and Bimby's telling them like to stop eating pork and stop doing some things, right? And Malcolm thinks it's a hustle. He like, man, he said, yo, like I heard about this, man. He's talking about like some medical condition or something. He thinking it's like a hustle to get out of prison. And I mean, like, yo, no, this isn't no hustle. And it's funny because like Malcolm thinking like, okay, stop eating pork and smoking cigarettes. Like, okay, maybe they know something I don't that's going to get me out of jail. He's not thinking that, you know, it has anything to do with religion. So, you know, between 47 48, Malcolm converts. 1948, Malcolm is going to be transferred to Norfolk Prison Colony. And that's when he gains access to this library. And so, speaking of the library, right? So, Malcolm, he mentions a lot of the books that he's going to be reading in the autobiography. And I just want to go through the book list really quick. Greetings. I'm going to go through this book list really quick, and this is just some of the books that was mentioned. One of the books I don't have here is like Highly Effective, How to Influence, what's that? How to Gain Friends. What's the name of that book? Somebody put that, How to Win Friends. Friends. Dang, I forgot the name of that book. I should have looked that up. But some of the books that he read though while he was in prison, Pierre Van Passon, Our Years. That's going to be books. Frederick Bodmer, The Loom of Language, An Approach to the Mastery of Many Languages, and Influence. Yeah. How to Win and influence people. Yeah, thank you. That's one of the books. And actually, I think it's Wilford or Filbert. I think it's Wilford that actually tells him to read this book. And the reason that he's telling Malcolm to read this book too, like Malcolm, he gets denied parole initially. The first time up, he gets denied parole. And so now his brother is telling him, read this book. This might help you, next time you up for parole. Right. So that's one of the books that Malcolm is going to read while he's in prison. This book, the Frederick Bodmer book, The Loom of Land. Malcolm reads that book, not particularly because it's going to help him learn other languages, right? But he contributes that book to him becoming a better speaker and having a better command of the English language. She says that book right there, The Loom of Language. I'm putting it out there in case people like, let me check this book out, The Loom of Language, see what it's about. He also Wonders of the World, Will Durant's Story of Civilization, H.G. Wells' Outline of History is another one. W.B. Du Bois' Souls of Black Folk is another book. He mentions that he's reading Carter G. Woodson's Negro History, J.A. Rogers' Sex and Race, Gregor Mendel's Findings in Genetics, and Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. He reads Herodotus, The Father of History. Those are just some of the books that was mentioned that was on his reading list. And Malcolm, he's going to become a great debater too. One of the things that Norfolk Penal Colony does, they have a debate team, and they're debating some of the college debate teams, local ones, Harvard being one of those schools that they're going to be debating, and they're kicking butt. Malcolm is going to be a part of that debate team. He's going to be a great debater, and we know from we hear the speeches, the interviews, so we can imagine what Malcolm was doing on that floor. But he gains a name for himself through his debating, being on the debate team, and these debates that are taking place too with these colleges, they're going to be heavily attended, not just from like the schools and outsiders, but even the prison. It becomes sort of a pastime. And mind you, they don't really have too much of anything else to do. But you have all of these people who are going to be attending these debates that are taking place. And this Norfolk Penal Colony debate team is doing a job on these college kids. So the other thing, I know we're winding down. The other thing I want to mention. Boom, where's my timeline? Okay, yeah. So here you go. March 23rd, 1950, he's going to transfer back to Charlestown State Prison. Not not his own volition though. Malcolm at this time is a member of the Nation of Islam, and there's concern that Malcolm may be spreading the teachings of Elijah Muhammad to the black prisoners. Excuse me. And so, Malcolm is being very secret about spreading this information to others. So Malcolm's well read. He's coming with Black history as he's talking to people and these other prisoners, but he's not quick to lead with, hey, it's this guy named Elijah Muhammad or Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You should, think about joining the Nation of Islam. The white man is the devil. In his own words, he's worried that there might be some sort of Uncle Tom in the midst that may go back and tell that he's, teaching the words or preaching the words of Elijah Muhammad. And so eventually word gets back and they come up with another excuse, but they would transfer Malcolm in 1950 back to Charlestown prison. While he's at Charlestown prison, he is going to write a letter claiming that I have been a communist. That's on January 9th. I don't know what that was about, but Malcolm, he wasn't a communist. But the interesting thing, so in 1951, his parole is denied. January 1952, members of Crispus Attucks Club of the American Youth for Democracy is going to visit Malcolm X. I'm highlighting this. Members of Crispus Attucks Club of the American Youth for Democracy is going to visit Malcolm in 1952 in January. That's interesting to me. I got to go back to Dr. John Henry Clark's FBI files, because when I'm looking at those files, there's a Crispus Attucks organization that is mentioned in those files, and I have to see if it's the same organization. But if I can recall, I think this organization was founded in Chicago. So I got to look at it because and the reason I'm mentioning it is because some like socialist communist nation, if it's the same nation, makes his prior statement about always been a communist, right? So this like trying to draw connections. There was like some dibbing and dabbing. Malcolm is well read. May have come across some information, talked to someone in prison. I don't know. There's definitely no evidence that Malcolm had joined any communist organization. But yeah. So just wanted to highlight that. So August 7th, 1952, as I mentioned, he's going to be paroled from state prison, and then August 8th, he travels back to Detroit. So yeah, man, that's basically it. Few other highlights. I mentioned that the college courses, Malcolm, prison life. He completed several college level correspondence courses during his first 11 months while at Charlestown. Again, that's important because it shows that it's not like really the Nation of Islam that's picking this guy up off of the floor. All right. Malcolm is already on his way to developing himself intellectually, and then again, like there's John Bembry, aka B, who's going to have this influence on Malcolm to make him want to even to pursue have intellectual pursuits even more, so to have this major influence on him. Also, Malcolm in the first early years, he's studying German, elementary German, and elementary Latin. I think that's significant as well. Early on, that's at Charlestown. This is before he gets to Norfolk. So with that being said, he was even studying before he meets Bemby. He's studying Latin, German, taking college courses. So I think like this meeting of even Bimby is going to have some more of an influence on him. But again, it's not like this person that's being picked up off the floor. I could say that Malcolm probably didn't have a real purpose and direction. Like his purpose probably was like, I'm trying to get to Norfolk, and I want to get out of prison, right? And so he's doing these things not to be like this revolutionary figure or to like fight against the system. You know, I'm going to join some sort of movement. But I think that he's like many of us are we come to a point where we know that, okay, in order for me to get further in life, there's things what we begin to develop a plan of action. You know, what do I have to do, you know, to get this rent paid, to make my circumstances even better. Malcolm is thinking like that, right? You know, there was a point where I'm working a 9 to 5, and I'm like, man, if I need to go back to college, because am I going to be here for another 10 years? If so, I'm in trouble. So, you know, I started thinking like, okay, what's my escape plan? I gotta make sure that in 10 years from now, especially I got children, I gotta make sure like in 10 years from now, like I'm not here busting sides and, you know, not making enough where I can survive in New York City. What I'm doing now is not going to be enough. So yeah, so we begin to develop plans and strategies, man, to get out. But you know, lucky, and I think too, you know, we sort of gain some purpose in life and the understanding of who our enemies are. So whether we agree with the Nation of Islam's teachings or not, I think it, you know, it did make Malcolm question everything he was being taught. It made him question the system, right? And that's what we have to do. We have to question what has been designed for us as African people, as Black people here in the United States of America. So I think we gonna end it there. It's 10. We 2 minutes over. I'll do these for an hour. May come back to this because I wanna explore Manny Marable's chapter a lot more and sort of make a comparison. But I'll be back Tuesday. Tuesday, definitely. I think when I come back Tuesday, man, I might cover another article. I'm looking at another articles now, particularly because I'm writing something on Malcolm. But hey, I appreciate everybody for tapping into this study though tonight. And again, you know, if you guys wasn't here in the beginning, the Claim Malcolm X Day Committee is doing its annual X Day Festival this year in Philadelphia, May 17th. I want to encourage folks to come out for that. And if you're feeling like you could support, make sure the WCC Cash App handle, you send anything, but definitely you know, CMXD PHL 65 for anybody who wants to support Malcolm X Day Committee. Shares the I should say we, because I'm part of the committee. I'm part of the committee. As we put on the 10th annual X Day Festival, and this 100th year of Malcolm X. So it's special. It's going to be big. Last thoughts we got. Boom. Shaheed, some remind me of Malcolm X. He says we need to invoke Article 6 against the U.S. to stop all the nonsense around the world. Shaheed, both, I gotta write that down. Boom. If you are in New York area this week, Friday, man, we bigging up Patrice Lumumba. John Huggins. I appreciate this intervention. Patrice Lumumba, John Huggins, and Bunchy Carter this week in New York City. The International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement will be organizing this program. So if you are in New York City, the New York area, definitely come out to Brownsville Heritage House in Brownsville Heritage House. Be there or be square from 4 to 6:30. And for those who don't know, this is also Patrice Lumumba's centennial, 100 years since the birth of Patrice Lumumba, the great revolutionary leader of Congo, who was taken out because of his revolutionary stance, because he was attempting to unite all of Africa, which would not have been in the best interest of the colonizers, right? Those colonizers. So when you talk about Patrice Lumumba, man, you had Belgium, France, and the United States of America working together to take out Patrice Lumumba. That's how they were able to, whatever differences like in language, culture, whatever they had that they do share that culture of colonialism and imperialism. I'll tell you that's something that they. And so definitely come out to that area, man. Again, appreciate that intervention. That's January the 17th. So with that being said, man, it's 10:06. I ain't gonna keep y'all any longer, but make sure you like, share, subscribe. So if folks wasn't here that you thought should be here, they can check out the replays. Until next time, see you Tuesday. Uhuru.
The white power structure, because that's all we have in America. And the white power structure today is just as much interested in perpetuating slavery as the white power structure was 100 years ago. Only now they use modern methods of doing so. And realizing that the black people in this country are waking up and becoming filled with a desire to be looked upon as men and as human beings. The white power structure, to slow down that struggle for freedom and human dignity, uses tricks. 100 years ago, they could do it with chains.